Hey guys, Ben Paynes here, and today we are back at Teamsport Cardiff. However, this time we have a bit of a special video, as this is in fact the BIKC 2022 local final, and obviously I am competing in the heavyweight category and we really want to get involved and do the best we can. Now, before the footage rolls, I would like to say, if you are new here, could you please hit the subscribe button, as I really would appreciate it. And also, if you do enjoy the video, could you hit the like button down below, as it really does mean the world to me. The support on the recent videos has been incredible and I only want it to continue further. However, here we are jumping straight into our practice session that we competed in at the start of the evening. So the evening was split into a 15-minute practice session, followed by a 15-minute qualifier, and then finally a 15-minute race, obviously to decide the final positions for the BIKC local final. Now, here I was trying to warm up the tyres, get the car in as good condition as I possibly could before I went on a few flying laps. Here we have a little bit of a light test, and there is a red light, but we get underway again straight away. So here my goal was just to try and be as consistent as I possibly can be. I've preached it so many times on the channel, and I just wanted to be as consistent as I possibly could be, just so I could have good race pace when it came to the race itself. So coming across the line to begin with, obviously with the stoppages of 53.522, which is to be expected, and I also didn't want to get caught up behind other cars. I wanted to run my own race. I didn't really want to pressure and try and force overtakes on people and cause myself to be in a bit of a sticky situation. So here, just on the first few laps, just really trying to bed the tyres in, get the car nice and warm, ready to perform some decent laps. And here you can see I'm going a little bit slower around these corners than I usually tend to go, and I was also going quite tight there, clipping the wall, so I'm not quite up to scratch to where I want to be yet. So my first official lap was a 36.858, which is a little bit of time off where I want to be, maybe about 1.5 seconds. So here I was really just trying to get involved, get stuck in, and use the driver in front of me as a bit of a marker to catch up to, as I could see them ahead, and I just wanted to catch up and maybe try and overtake. Obviously the person ahead of me here is James, who I'd like to give a big shout out to. He did a really good job in the event and we did have a really good battle, so I was really trying to close up to him here. I realised that he was my biggest competition for the race, so here I was really trying to stick behind him in practice and try and prove to myself that I had what it takes to sort of keep up with him and maybe even put in some better laps than him. At this point in the session I was just trying to practice being as smooth as possible, just to adapt to the track. Obviously I had watched some of the other finals, such as the lightweights and the middleweights, and just trying to learn from them, just to see where I could sort of be as smooth as possible compared to sliding around some of the corners and losing a lot of time. So here, just trying to get my line correct for the race here, and just trying to be as tight as possible to the apexes, just trying to be as consistent as I possibly could be. You can see there 36.224, so not the best lap there, getting a few things wrong, and this led to me losing a bit of time to James that was up ahead of me. However, here you can see him not going the perfect lines through some of the corners, but I was just trying to get my head into the right frame of mind. Obviously this race was actually, or this event was actually postponed a little bit in terms of time, so I believe it was around 11 o'clock at this point, so fatigue was really setting in already, and we hadn't even started the race. I had been up since 6 o'clock in the morning, so I did feel reasonably tired, but I wasn't going to let this stop me from pushing to my overall goal of doing the best of my abilities as I possibly can. You see me even there already leaning forward, trying to gain as little wind resistance as I possibly could up the ramp to try and do anything I can to catch up to James ahead. You can see how much time I'm actually gaining through the hairpin sections. You can see how much bigger he is on the screen already, so putting in some decent laps to start with, going a little bit too hot into the hairpin there and clipping the wall, but this didn't stop me from just keeping my foot stuck in round the right hander at the bottom section, also just really sending it in quite close to the apex on the complex section, which allowed me here, you can see how much time I'm gaining, especially through the bottom hairpin there coming up the hill. Now I think James, to be fair to him, did have a car that was a little bit off the pace in practice, so I wasn't fully allowing myself to think that, oh, I'm this far ahead of James at this point. So here I was really closing up, and I was really just trying to tag along behind him, just trying to let him know that I was there and put him under a little bit of pressure. So play a little bit of mind games for later in the session. So here I'm really getting close to him, here I'm really tagging along behind him. We come across the line here at 35.975, so not too consistent currently, being a little bit shaky to start off with, but you can see how much time I'm actually managing to gain up the ramp, and this is probably the first time I've ever actually gained time up the ramp in an event on opponents ahead of me. Obviously everyone here was around the same weight, and in fact me and James were exactly the same weight on the scales, both weighing in at exactly 90 kilograms, which was absolutely perfect for the race. Obviously being in the heavyweight category, you do want to be above 90 kilograms or on 90 kilograms as the limit, and we both nailed it absolutely perfectly. But there once again a 36.208, so not too good, and I think this is a detriment to being behind James. He does wade me through here just to let me have a little bit of clean air, and I think he was going to then follow me through and see how he could follow my lines and do a little bit better. Now here I thought about just racing away as quickly as I could, but then I thought maybe I'll play a few more mind games with James by taking some unconventional lines in some of the corners, just to maybe make him think that that was a quicker route around the track, to maybe later in qualifying take some of these routes, and it allows me to actually pull off my own normal routes to sort of do better. So you can see how much wider I go there into the hairpin, hoping that he follows the line, and checking back just to see if he was following me through, which he was. So there I was just trying to just stay ahead, just trying to be a little bit unorthodox through some of the corners, which obviously isn't my best line, but clearly I also wanted to put in some decent lap times for myself so that I could try and give myself as much confidence going into qualifying. So here again, trying to get back into the groove right away after going around some of the corners in a little bit of a different manner, coming through the complex section now of a 36-second lap again, and there this time through the bottom hairpin, taking more the route that I usually take at this point. I think I had gained a little bit of time over James. As I said, his kart was a little bit off the pace, and here I was really just trying to get into the groove now and just trying to get my head down and put in as best laps as I possibly could. Coming down here at the bottom of the ramp, really swinging the kart in, trying to almost clip the apex there on entry, and really maximising the exit to try and get as good drive down the straight as I possibly could. Trying to maintain momentum was exactly the key. Being as heavy as I am, trying to maintain as much speed and as high revs as I possibly could through the corners really does help me to gain as much momentum as I possibly can. You can see I do take a very unorthodox line compared to other people coming up the ramp here at Cardiff, but it really does help me, as I feel that the more speed I carry into that bottom hairpin, the more I'm able to get out of it by going up the ramp. And I don't even use the brake there, I just sort of swing the wheels in and just really hope that I can just carry as much momentum as I possibly can. You can see it almost going into the back of, I believe that was Callum there, so I didn't really want to give him a shove, but luckily he let me past. And here I was just trying to reset after that bit of a slower lap and just trying to get back into the groove once again. You can see we came across the line now 36-second dead, so a little bit off the pace for my fastest lap, and I really wanted to try and get the consistency back down to get into the mid 35s at least. I knew I had the pace for a low 35-second lap, obviously from the Monday night socials that I've been doing and also some of the elite events, so I knew that I was a little bit off the pace, obviously from seeing some of the other events as well earlier in the night, the lightweights and the middleweights. I knew that they were around the 35-second, maybe even to the 34-second lap, so I knew I was a little bit off the pace at this point. I could feel it in myself, and I really wanted to try and get through and get some faster laps. You can see straight away 35.649, so getting down straight away with a little bit of clean air and using the drivers, as I've said, drivers ahead as a marker just to try and catch up to. You can see another driver ahead there going around the hairpins, and I really was just trying to get as tight as possible and really push myself to put in as quick lap times as I possibly could, really swinging the kart in once again and maximising the exit as I mentioned earlier, just trying to stay as straight as possible down the straight there. Just by turning, obviously it does slow the kart down a little bit, going a little bit wide into that corner and just losing myself a little bit of time, but we do come across the line there 35.964, so not the best again, losing a little bit of time, but we were able to catch up to the kart ahead of us. You can see getting a little bit disappointed in myself, and luckily the driver down the right, I believe that was Carl actually, who did a really good job on the evening. He just moved to the right there just to allow me to get past, and I think he also just followed me through and just to try and improve on his own lap times, which I think he did a really good job of. He set a new PB that evening, so here we're just trying to get as tight as possible once again, just trying to reset, just not really having the best run so far, so just trying to come around the corners as smooth as possible. You can see a 35.642, so even though I didn't feel that was the best lap, we still were able to have the fastest lap so far of our evening. And here once again just trying to stick to the middle of the track on that little left hand corner there, the little kink, just because I feel that going completely to the right does lose you a little bit of track length, and that causes you to lose obviously crucial tenths that are required to just be as fast as possible on the track. Obviously the karts don't quite have the power to have all the momentum coming out of the corners, so they're getting really tight once again into the complex section, really getting as tight to the walls as I possibly could. Coming across the line now, another fast lap of 35.546, sorry, and we're just coming back up the ramp, just trying to look and see if there's any more markers to sort of catch up ahead of us, but there wasn't any there. You can see another driver just heading down the ramp there, and I think that was sort of my benchmark to try and catch up to by the end of the session. Obviously at this point we are about 2/3 of the way into the session, and I really wanted to try and put in some decent laps just to prove to myself that I did have the pace to be in first position coming out of practice. So here we are just coming around some of the complex sections once again, coming across the line at 35.622, so staying quite consistently in the mid 35-second laps. Obviously I wasn't too disappointed with this, as this was the first session on, and just wanted to get the rust out, going a little bit too hot there into the corner and just clipping the barrier there, which obviously slowed me down a little bit and probably did knock my confidence a little bit as well. So you can see there me just trying to warm up the tyres just out of desperation, just to try and get a better lap. So here you can see me taking a little bit steadier down the straight and into the right hand corner, just to try and get my mind focused, get my mind back into the game. I took a bit of a wider line here to almost take a qualifying lap, just to go a little bit wider. Obviously I sort of sacrificed my last lap, which was a 37-second lap, and then I wanted to get a better run down the start finish straight before the first hairpin. So here going really smooth into the corners, getting as close as I possibly can to the barriers, as close as I dare. Again, just getting found a really good braking point into that first hairpin, which really allowed me to get the turn into the apex really cleanly. And here once again maximising the exit down the back straight here, down the bottom, just swinging the car in a little bit of a slide just to try and get the back end sort of rotated, just so I can go through as flat as I possibly could. Coming through the complex section here, 35.381, so in my head I could tell immediately that felt quicker than it was when I wasn't taking that wider line coming across the start finish straight. So this is something that I sort of adopted later into the session as well, just because I realised that having that little bit of extra speed coming down the start finish straight really allowed me to gain a couple of tenths that I wouldn't have had by trying to stay as tight as I possibly could to the apexes. Now coming through once again, really swinging it in, going a little bit wide there, but not too bad, just once again hugging as tight as I can, and again going for another flying lap in a way. So you can see sacrificing the last lap, a 36-second lap, and this is something that I was adopting, as I usually just go round at just a high pace, just try and be as quick as possible. But I realised by having one lap on, one lap off, this really allowed me to get back into the zone and sort of reflect on the previous lap and how I could improve. You see, getting a little bit too tight to the apexes there by the hairpin clipping the barrier with the back of the car, which obviously slows the car down by dragging it against the barriers. But again, really swinging the car in on the right hand corner, just really holding my foot down into that section, going a little bit wide there into the complex section, but we do come across the line at 35.593, so not a bad lap there, but one that we feel that we can improve on going on later into the session. And I do believe at this point that the 35.381 was in fact my fastest lap of the session, so I wasn't actually able to improve on the lap times going later into the session. Here you can see another driver, I believe that was Sarah, just going out of the way, give her a little bit of a thumbs up just to give me the space to carry on my flying laps, just a bit more practice. So here trying to get as tight as possible again, and obviously where I got a little bit slow through the track, I just wanted to take that a little bit wider again, just to try and get as quick run across the start finish straight as I possibly could. You can see a 35.624. We are coming up behind some more traffic there once again, so I didn't want to catch up to them before the end of the lap, but you can see how quickly I'm closing in on them through their hairpin sections, how much time I actually managed to gain. I believe that's Callum again up ahead, so here I was really following behind at this point and just trying to tuck in as much as I could. Maybe it's a little bit of the slipstream going down the straight. Obviously there's not too much going as slow as we do in these karts, but here you can see going a little bit too wide there, and I think I abandoned that lap in a way. But as you saw there on the left hand side, it didn't really matter because that was in fact the end of practice. So we come across the line with our fastest lap being a 35.381, as I mentioned earlier, and this did in fact put me 3/10 up in first position, which I was super happy with. I did know, however, that James did have a little bit more pace to show, as he was in a bit of a slower kart. But in the meanwhile, let's get into the qualifying session. So here we are then, guys, going into and jumping straight into the qualifying session. You can see me there just warming up the tyres, and we were in fact placed in a very nice position behind James, who I've mentioned many times throughout this video, and this gave me good confidence because it allowed me just to see what his pace was like in a qualifying run, and then to see if I was able to catch up with him or if he was able to sort of break away, just so I could gauge sort of what the pace was like. Obviously he was in the kart that I believe I was in practice, so I knew it was a decent kart, and I feel that he was going to put in some decent laps. So here I was actually behind him, and the kart I was using felt completely different to the kart I used in the first session. The brake pedal was completely different, so I had to adapt to that pretty quickly, and I think this meant that James was able just to break away from me at the beginning and put in some better laps than I did, which clearly shows from the way that he is breaking away immediately out of the blocks ahead of me. So I didn't want to let this get my head down. You can see me taking a little bit of a wider approach to the complex section just before the start minute straight. We come straight in with 35.929, which isn't a bad time for a first lap. You see me urging the kart forward. You can see James up ahead behind another driver, and I really wanted to keep up pace with him and not really let him just drive off into the distance. And I knew this would let my head drop, and I'd realised that my pace just wasn't on compared to him. So once again, you can see Callum up ahead. I come up right behind him through the bottom section. He does move to the right to allow me to go through, which I was really appreciative of. And we went a little bit too hot into the right hander there and clipped the wall. But once again, we are behind James, taking a little bit of a wider line once again, just to come across the start finish straight as much pace as possible. Here, just swinging the kart really well into the bottom left hairpin and coming up the ramp. You can see James up ahead, and this was sort of my mental marker to try and catch up with. But you can see there he is actually taking the corners on the hairpins quite well, and this is meaning that I am maintaining the distance behind him rather than closed up on him as I was in the first session. So here I was really trying to get my head down, trying to get into the right groove, sort of get the lap times down from where they were in the practice sessions. I don't think they were as good as they could have been. Come across the line there, 35.896, so only a marginal improvement on the first lap, and I could tell that I was a little bit off the pace here. So I was really trying to get my head around that and trying to get back into the right frame of mind to try and catch up to James, who at this point was flying along. He's actually increasing the distance on me ahead, so I knew at this point that he was actually flying. So I could tell that the times in practice weren't really justified for what his ability was. And here I was just trying to close the gap and make sure I didn't lose too much time. And I had a kart here that was really good on low end power, it really felt explosive, but as it got to sort of the mid-range, it just felt really difficult, especially going up the ramp. I was losing a little bit of time to some of the other drivers. You can see there, I believe that's Sarah again, just moving to the right hand side, allowing me to go through, which, as I said, really appreciative of, just able to carry on following James through the top section of the track. But as I mentioned, my kart felt a little bit down on power, and I realised that my kart wasn't actually as good as the one James was using. So at this point I was really trying to use my brain and think what I could do to try and really put in some decent laps, trying to catch up to him here. See how much time I gained through the complex section, really closing up, getting that corner a lot better than he does. A 35.7 second lap again, but not quite up to the standard that I wanted to be. Getting the hairpin a little bit wrong there and losing a little bit of time to the driver ahead, but once again just trying to swing the kart in around the left hand corner at the top, really getting as close to the barriers as I've mentioned so many times. Again, the apexes really of the hairpin, really just trying to get as close as possible on all of the corners, getting the bottom hairpin a little bit wrong there, losing a little bit of time. And you can see James sort of maintaining the gap ahead, so I knew that we were around the same sort of pace at this point, and here I was able to close up a lot of time. But obviously on the exit of the line I take, he was able to break away at 35.802, so still not quite into the rhythm that I want to be in. And obviously following behind James really did help me a lot here, because it allowed me just to realise where I was going wrong. See, there I go a little bit wrong, shaking my head there as I did hit the barrier, going in a little bit too hot. That lost me a little bit of time to James. And here I was just trying to get back into the rhythm as quickly as I could, as I didn't want to be off the pace. Obviously qualifying is super important, and it's pretty much where the race is won in indoor karting, if I'm honest, because it is very difficult to overtake unless you put in some good lap times. So I knew here, obviously the last lap was a bit of a failure after hitting the wall, so I wanted to try and take the wider line once again just to try and get as better momentum across the start finish straight going into the bottom hairpin, and once again just trying to be as smooth as possible on the pedals here, using, there's a little lighter patch on the floor there on the left hand side. Now I was using that as a braking reference. It really was helping me to get round the first hairpin at the top of the track, and that by trail braking into that corner rather than just hitting the brakes and sort of sliding in, it really did allow me to be very smooth and keep as much grip as I possibly could, which obviously then renders through to the tyres, and this allows me to have a better run. You can see immediately a 35.547 lap, which was incredible at this point. It was pretty much where I wanted to be at this point. I wanted to be a little bit faster, obviously 35.3 in practice, and I knew that I had the pace in me. It was just about getting the lap right and being as smooth as I possibly could through the corners. You can see there though, James once ahead is actually pulling a bit of a gap on me, and this was making me a little bit nervous, if I'm honest. I was a little bit worried that he was actually going to qualify ahead of me, so here I really was digging in deep and trying to put as much determination as I possibly could into my laps, just to try and get as good a lap time as I possibly could. You can see a 35.681, obviously a little bit of a slower lap, and this might be detriment to how I go across the start finish line. Obviously, as I said, you do gain about a tenth of a second by going a little bit wider and gaining a little bit of speed across the start finish straight, so this is something that I had to think about going into the remainder of the session here. Obviously we still had a few laps left to go, and here just going as straight as I possibly could before swinging the car in, keeping my foot planted as much as possible through the bottom right hand section, and then getting as tight as possible to the apexes there on the exit of the complex section. Almost identical lap there, 35.685 instead of a 681, so being super consistent with my lap times. Is just, I don't have the pace right now in this car. I wasn't able to get as much out of the car as I wanted to, and this was allowing James up ahead just to sort of pull away. And I was a little bit worried, as I mentioned earlier, I was a little bit worried that I was going to be stuck in second position here. I wasn't able to actually, the kart didn't feel very quick, so here I was really just trying to maximise as much as I could out of it, just to try and not only obviously get as much out of the car as I possibly could, but also out of myself. You can see coming across the line at 35.529. So that's our fastest lap so far. I believe this was about a tenth down on James at this point, so I was really just trying to stick up close to him and trying to be as quick as I possibly could, but unfortunately you see there hitting the barriers, I was actually pushing myself a little bit too hard, and this meant that I was hitting some of the barriers, making a few mistakes, and this is some things that I needed to minimise and just to stop panicking, which is obviously key in this sort of situation. The calmer you are and the smoother you are, the better lap times you're going to get. So as I hit the wall there, you can see taking a nice wide line there just to try and get the car as straight as possible before going across the start finish straight. We come swinging round the hairpin once again, and you can see James up ahead stuck behind another driver that he is just passing there, and I didn't want to get stuck on this lap as well, as I felt this was a pretty decent lap. So here really swinging it into the apexes of the hairpins, just getting as tight as I possibly dared without touching the barriers. Here once again just trying to get as tight as possible, unfortunately giving Callum a little bit of a tap there as I was just trying to flow through as fast as I could, but I did back off, but he did wave me through, so I was quite happy about that once again. And obviously as I did get slowed a little bit, I thought I'd go again once more for a wider approach across the start finish straight, getting the hairpin a little bit wrong there, not getting as tight as I wanted to and not getting as good as an exit as I wanted to, but we did carry on through the lap regardless. We're coming around here, almost scraping the barrier, which is perfect. We want to be as fast as possible through that right hand corner again, getting as tight as we possibly can to the hairpins, just swinging it in and almost getting that hairpin absolutely perfect, scraping the barrier on the inside, which obviously the closer you can be, the shorter the track is, the less time you're going to spend going around the track. Again, trying to get a good run out of the complex section. We come across the line now, 35.614, so still not up to scratch with our fastest lap, and you can see how much time James is actually pulling away once again. So in my head, as I mentioned though, I was feeling a little bit disappointed at this point, but I was just wondering what I could do to try and allow myself to catch up to him and just do as good a job as I possibly could. Again, just going a little bit wide into the bottom hairpin, not quite getting the lines right going into there, so losing a little bit of time, and again just trying to be as tight as possible to the corners on the complex section, swinging the car a little bit wider there just to get a good exit. Again, a 35.6, so still we can break through back down to our fastest lap, which was a bit of a shame at this point, and I was really trying to work hard just to catch up and just try and put in as good a performance as I possibly could. Here again, just trying to really be smooth on these hairpins, just to try and get as good an exit as I possibly could. Coming into the bottom hairpin here, once again getting as close as I possibly can to the hairpin without actually touching it. And here I really was just trying to go as fast as I can through the right hand corner, just to try and get as good an exit as I possibly could into the complex section. You can see there it is paying off. However, we come across the line of 35.421, which is our fastest lap so far, and one that we were looking to build on now. The confidence was growing as there was a bit of clean air ahead of me, and I was really just trying to put in some decent lap times. Obviously, at this point I did think that I was going to be in second position behind James, due to him just bolting off almost every lap as soon as I was catching up to him. So here I was just trying to, I could see him up ahead with a back marker, or another driver, sorry, and I was just trying to catch up and just trying to be in contention with him, just trying to see how he does. You can see there he backs off a little bit on that lap, and this allows me to really catch up to him. And I thought in my head, what can I sort of do to try and just disrupt him, just trying to play a few mind games with him, just trying to get ahead of him, because I could see that he was driving faster than me at this point, as I did feel my car was a little bit off the pace compared to him in this session. Obviously he was flying around really well and he was doing a really good job. So here I was just trying to close up as much as I could down the back straight here, and going into the right hander here in the complex section. I really closed up quite a lot, which allowed me just to really get into contention and see what sort of lap times I could do. Again, a 35.594, so a pretty decent lap. You can see James there behind me just moving to the right, and I think he just wanted me to deal with the back marker that was up ahead. Obviously there was only a few laps left to go at this point, so instead of doing what I did in the last session and sort of going as wide as I possibly could just to throw him off, I thought if I could get ahead of, I believe that's Carl up ahead, so I wanted to try and get past him and try and put in some decent laps. But then I thought to myself, as you can see, Carl goes very wide there, and it allows me just to really close up behind him, and then also just go for a move down the inside just to try and make sure that I was ahead. Now at this point in the session, I knew that I had to be as quick as I possibly could be, just to try and pull away from James, and hopefully he was battling with Carl in the qualifying session. So here I knew this lap wasn't going to be the best, obviously being a little bit compromised into the hairpin corner at the bottom. So I just wanted to try and just gain myself a little bit of space on this lap, just go a little bit slower, just to back up James into Carl, back up both the drivers behind me, just to give myself a little bit more space. You see there me going a little bit wider there once again, and we come across line at 36.648, which obviously was detriment to me, just going a little bit slower through that lap. And here I was just trying to get as quick a lap time as I possibly could, going through the different corners here, just trying to be as smooth as possible. So here just getting as tight as I possibly could to the apexes, just trying to break away from the two drivers behind me, and just trying to put in as good laps I knew I could. I knew I had more speed in me and more time to gain. And here coming through the right hand corner here, just getting as tight as I possibly could, keep my foot in as much as I can, just getting really tight to the apexes there. Coming through the last corner, we do come across the line with 35.484, which wasn't actually the best lap I could possibly do. So at this point I thought, what could I do? I could see a driver up ahead. I didn't know if this was the last lap or there was the last few laps remaining, so I didn't really want to catch up to the driver ahead at this point. I wanted to try and build myself a little bit of space. So here at this point I did start to take the track a little bit slower. You can see in my feet there, I do actually lift off the throttle just to give myself a little bit more space to the person ahead. And also this did help me, because at this point I believe James was behind me as well, and this was actually backing him up. So there, by going a little bit slower, he also had a little bit of a slower lap, and I think he got a little bit frustrated by this, and he sort of just sent it past me and just tried to carry on his own. So once again here I just decided to take this lap a little bit slower, backing off, just because I knew there was a driver up ahead that could sort of cause an issue on the last few laps. So here you can see I'm just holding back a little bit, letting him sort of close up to the driver ahead. I knew that at this point we were coming really close to the end of the session, so there I let James bolt off into the distance behind the driver ahead, and I think this was the biggest mistake he could have made, because here we do come across the line, obviously another 37-second lap, but here I started to go absolutely flat out. I tried my absolute best just to try and catch back up to James and try and just get as good a lap time in as I possibly could. You can see he dives down the inside there on the driver ahead, which obviously causes him a few issues on his lap. He's not going to have the best lap by forcing an overtake into the flying lap. You can see the driver ahead go a little bit wide, and I didn't really want to catch up to them before the end of the lap, because I felt I was on a really good lap at this point. I'd had a really tidy lap, a really clean lap. We come through the complex section here, we do get as tight as we possibly can to the final few corners, and we come across the line with the checker flag with a 35.298, which I was super happy with. And this was in fact 11 thousandths of a second ahead of James, so I was actually able to start in pole position for the race, which I was super happy with, and I couldn't believe it, especially as I said, I felt that my car was a little bit off the power, a little bit off the pace, and this was amazing for me. So let's see how we get on in the race. So here we have it, guys, all of the practice, all of the hard work that I put in for the last few months all boils down to this. The lights are red and they are about to go green as we do get underway. So here I just tried to get as good a start as I possibly could, bunny hopping out of the start and actually able to get the jump on the people behind me, and I think this was due to the fact that I was actually fueled to the eyeballs with caffeine at this point, and I really was ready just to smash out as much as I possibly could. So here going very defensively into the first few corners just to allow myself to hold the position in first place and sort of keep ahead of some of the drivers that were behind me, and maybe if they were to make a little bit of a challenge on me. So there you can see going a little bit narrower into the first few corners, getting the bottom hairpin a little bit wrong, and this allowed the drivers behind me sort of to just stick close behind. And here I was feeling the pressure at this point, I won't lie. I was a little bit nervous. It's the first time I've ever actually led a race at Teamsport or any race in general, so here I was just trying to be as consistent as possible, trying to not make any mistakes. You can see our first lap at 36.141 second lap, and we was really focusing on just trying to get my head down and just trying to pull away from the drivers ahead. Obviously, as the drivers were behind me, I was taking a bit of a defensive line, as I mentioned. You can see not quite going to the edges of the track to get as good a run through the corners as I possibly could. Looking back a fair few times to check where the drivers were behind me at this point, I think me and James, who was in second, had actually managed to pull a little bit of a gap to the drivers behind. So as I mentioned, it was a bit of a two-horse race at this point, and here I do on the ramp check back so many times. Coming up that ramp, you're going to see that throughout the rest of the video, just be checking over my shoulder every single lap just to see where I was, see what sort of position I was in, and if I could defend or if I could even go for a bit more of an aggressive line just to try and gain a little bit more speed and space for myself. So there again, looking back, just trying to be as consistent as I possibly could. This is one thing I've really been practicing at Teamsport recently, just trying to be as consistent as I can, just so I can try and pull away and just be as quick as I possibly can. You can see straight away a 35.781, so already the times are falling immediately, and at this point I realised I had a little bit of a gap. There's about 1 or 2 kart lengths of a gap, which meant that I could go a little bit more towards the racing line instead of going as narrow as I was through the first few laps. Here, getting it really tight into the hairpin there. Not as tight as I'd like, but I'm always going to say that after the event has been concluded. Going a little bit wide there, almost scraping the wall, but able to keep my foot in as much as I possibly could. Through the right hand corner, we come across the line again at 35.736, so again a faster lap compared to the previous one before. We come up the ramp once again, just trying to be as wide and as smooth as I possibly could on the steering. You can see how little steering input I'm actually putting into the wheel and sort of turning with my whole body rather than just using the wheel to flick the car in. Obviously on a few of the corners such as the hairpins, I really am having to flick the wheel just to allow the car to have a little bit of a slide, just so I can get the back end round and have the right angle to sort of push myself away there. Getting the corner a little bit wrong there, hitting the brakes a little bit too much, and this did bog me down, but we do come across the line again at 35.710, so another faster lap. You can see me double checking over my shoulder there, and I think I was a little bit surprised. I was actually forging a little bit of a gap, which I didn't really expect. So here I was just once again just trying to knuckle down, get my head into the groove, just trying to be as quick and consistent as I possibly could be, just run my own race and not allow the drivers behind me to try and catch up and give them an opportunity to make a move into any of the corners. Obviously I had learned from some of the Monday night's from the Monday night sessions, just if there is a driver behind me, just to stick to the middle of the track to not allow them away past. But luckily for me at this point, I was actually able to just pull away and just run my own race. So again, we came across the line at 35.682, which I was super happy with. The times are extremely consistent compared to where they were in the practice and qualifying, so I think I found almost a second wind at this point in the evening. Obviously it was around 12 o'clock at this point, it was very late, and it had been an extremely long evening or day, so I was really just trying to be as consistent as I possibly could, just to fight the battle in my head, just to try and do as well as I possibly could. You can see again, coming across the line even faster, a 35.503 second lap, which I was super happy with. We really were motoring at this point and just really getting the laps in, which obviously I was completely surprised about. I found some resurgence of energy, as I said, so here just really just getting as tight as I possibly could, just trying to be as smooth as I could, trying not to make any mistakes. Obviously any clips with the barriers, any sort of slides, they would all be detriment to myself and sort of cause me to just lose time to the drivers behind. So here I knew James was still behind me at this point, but we do come across the line another quick lap at 35.457, checking back over my shoulder once again. I knew that he was hot on my heels and I didn't want to make any mistakes that allow him to just sort of catch up to me. So there, going quite quick through the left hand corner and really swinging the car in to the two hairpins, being really consistent in our times here, really consistent in our driving, and this really was allowing me to break away from the rest of the pack, which I was extremely happy with, as I didn't really expect it. Again, just getting really flat out through the bottom right hand corner there and just taking some really nice lines through the complex section, which meant once again we have an even faster lap once more, 35.447. so every lap of the race so far has been a faster lap compared to the lap previously, which obviously I could feel in myself that I was really motoring, I was really putting in a good performance here, really just trying to be as consistent as I can, which I have preached on this channel so many times. It's so important, especially in a race situation, because the more consistent you are, even if it's a little bit slower, the more consistent you are, the better you're going to flow throughout the race, and it's going to allow you to put yourself in a better position come at the end of the race. Again, we come across the line at 35.320, so really getting quite quick now, almost getting the same sort of lap times I was in qualifying and practice. You can see me double check over my shoulder again, and I think at this point I was about 5 to 6 kart lengths ahead, so it actually forced a bit of a gap to James behind me, which I was so pleased with, and I was just trying to make sure that my head didn't really run away from me. I was really just trying to focus on looking ahead rather than looking back and worrying about what was going on behind me. I just wanted to worry about running my own race, as I mentioned. And you can see that our first back marker is ahead of us and we're coming up towards them. We come across the line at 35.426, so the first lap of the race where we don't improve on our fastest lap, but that's not too bad, because as long as we are keeping the average lap time down, then the more consistent we're going to be and the faster we're going to get around the track. Now here, obviously, my problems with back markers, I was a little bit worried that Callum ahead would sort of get in the way a little bit and sort of ruin how I was going round, but luckily for me, he did move to the right hand side there, very polite, he did let me go past, which I was very pleased with, and big shout out to him, as he could have literally just parked it on the apex and that would have caused me issues and allowed James to catch up behind me, but luckily we're able to forge on another 35.4 second lap, so every single lap now at this point is within a tenth of each other, and I'm really being quick and consistent, and I'm really happy with this performance, probably one of my best performances on track today, coming round really smooth here into the bottom left hand corner here, bottom left hairpin, not going as close as I want to through that section, but I feel that at this point in the session the kart was really warmed up, really ready to go, ready to rumble, and we come across the line again at 35.374, so only half a tenth off our fastest lap, being super consistent with our lap times, is really flying. At this point in the race I felt that I was really in a flow state. I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing, I was just sort of going around the track just lap after lap, and it was just everything was hitting its mark. It wasn't a struggle with the kart. I felt at one with the kart and the track. I was really just flowing around the track. Every single movement in the steering wheel and the pedals was just autonomous. I wasn't forcing anything. I wasn't struggling. Another 35.3 second lap. You can could see how consistent I'm being almost every lap, almost robotic in how I'm actually just putting the exact same times in almost every single lap. So coming round again, the top hairpin, just really hitting the same breaking point that I have throughout the whole evening, and going a little bit too tight into the second hairpin, and I could tell that my fatigue was setting it a little bit, but I was able to just keep the momentum going and just try and push on. At this point I was really thinking of how hard I'd worked, and that was really pushing me forward just to try and keep pushing the car as much as I possibly could. You can see a little bit of a slower lap there due to hitting the walls, a 35.532, but at this point I had forced a lot of a gap to the driver behind, so this allowed me just to really almost not have as much pressure on myself, so I was able to not step my foot off the gas. I was really still trying to put in as good lap times as I possibly could, but I wasn't really pressuring myself to just really chuck the car in and really just try to go as fast as I possibly could. I was trying to just be consistent was my goal here, just to try and consistently hit the same sort of braking points, the same times to put my foot on the accelerator. You can see again a 35.339, so only 19 thousandths off our fastest lap, and it really was showing that the consistency in our lap times was just close, which is perfect for an event of such a high caliber such as this. So here I was really just trying to keep my sort of position ahead. You can see, check it back there, I was actually really surprised by the gap that I'd sort of forged to the driver behind, and I was really just trying to keep that momentum going, trying to put an even bigger gap if I could to James was behind me. We come across the line now at 35.273 second lap, which was really fast, actually faster than my qualifying and practice times. So you can see I really was on the pace now at this point, a lot of clean air on the track, and this allowed me to really just put in as quick lap times as I possibly could. Coming down to the left hairpin once again, getting as tight as I possibly can and possibly dare to that apex without clipping it. Again, just going really tight into the right hander here, just trying to make sure that I was minimising any mistakes, as I've mentioned, just trying to make sure I didn't hit any of the barriers and lose a bit of time. You can see there 35.4 second lap, so a little bit off the pace there compared to the 35.3 and 35.2 that I just put in, but it's still a very quick and decent lap for the weight category that I'm in. Again, just swinging the car into the apexes as much as I dare, just to make sure that I can minimise as much of the track length as I possibly can, just really getting as good a run down the straight at the back here as I possibly can as well. And then also, as I've mentioned before, just braking on that first little apex going into the complex section, just to allow the car to slow down enough to allow it not to slide. By trail braking into that corner, it really does allow the car to slow down enough where you're able to get the car turned in correctly and then put the foot down on the power to exit the corner. And here again you can see we're approaching some more back markers now at this point in the race, and this was something once again that I was a little bit worried about. I'd actually been dreaming about collecting a back marker and maybe even ruining my race, so I didn't want this to happen under any circumstances. So I was just trying to be as focused as I possibly could be and just trying to stay as positive as I could. Another 35.3 second lap, so almost the same as our fastest lap once again, and really showing our speed here as we catch up to Sarah ahead of us, who is one of the back markers, and you can also see the other drivers there from about 5th to 3rd up ahead of them. So here I was just trying to make sure that I was just being as focused as I possibly could be, just trying to maintain my lines rather than just taking any different unorthodox lines. I was just trying to stay in my flow state, and actually, as a matter of fact, I was able to do this. I was able to put in still some decent laps. You see another 35.430. Sarah goes wide there to allow me to go past. I do actually say thank you. This is something I was really worried about, and again you can see Callum up ahead, so a couple of the back markers here that were actually lapping here. I go up the inside here of Callum, which obviously sends us off a little bit of a different line, so obviously our lap time is going to be a little bit slower there, but this is not one thing to worry about, as we're able to get past smoothly and efficiently, which meant that I didn't lose too much time to the drivers behind. And I think that this was one of the good things for me, is I was able to actually get past quite quickly, whereas I think the person in second actually struggled to get past some of the back markers at points, and this meant that they were held back and were a little bit slow. You can see their Carl up ahead of us in the car ahead, and I was really trying to get past him as quickly as I possibly could. You can see they're just moving to the inside there, coming into the hairpin. So once again, going to have a little bit of a slower lap, but I said thank you to him as I went back round again, as he did go wide to allow me to go past. You can see there the black suit of James behind me, so I could see the gap that I've sort of forged by just carving through the back markers as quickly as I possibly could, and this allowed me to just have a big gap and a big bit of space up ahead. You can see a 35.242, so our fastest lap of the race so far, and I think this was actually my fastest lap of the evening. So our fastest lap was a 35.242, and this is a really respectable lap. Obviously not as quick as I have got in some Monday night socials or even the elite events, but still a lap time I was very happy with, especially concerning the occasion that we were under, the BIKC. So here, coming round the last few corners here, just dipping in as close as I possibly dared to the complex section, we do come across the line here once more with a 35.264, so being really consistent once again now into 35.2 second laps, and with a lot of space ahead of me, I was really looking forward to just really ploughing on and putting in as good a lap time as I possibly could. Now I don't think I realised at this point that this was in fact one of the last lap, or if not the last lap of the race. So here once again, just trying to be as tight as I possibly could. You could see that the marshal on the right hand side there with the flag in his hand ready to wave it. So I think at this point I did yell out a bit of a cheer to myself as we come around the last corner there to the checkered flag, and I was absolutely ecstatic at this point. I was screaming to myself, I was so happy, fist bumping. You can't quite see it on the video, however here is some footage from the podium celebrations.
And the man of the night with the best out of a 35.242, give us a better please! And one last round of applause for your top three drivers. Well done, Tony and Peter, thank you for joining us this year. If we can get the top 6 drivers, how much?
So there we have it, guys. I was super happy, and I was actually able to go around on a victory lap in celebrations, and I was super excited. I was super happy at this point. It's probably one of the best moments of my life. I was so happy carrying that flag around the track. But I would like to say a big thank you to all you guys for supporting me and all the messages that I've received following the win that I've had at the BIKC local final at Cardiff. And I really couldn't do it without you guys. You guys support me so much, and I appreciate every single one of you. However, this does in fact bring us to the end of the video, so I would like to say, if you have enjoyed it, it was a bit of a long one, but if you have enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more in the future. I really am looking forward to bringing some more events very soon, including the regional final. As always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.